皆様、本日は第4回石橋財団レクチャーシリーズにお越しいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。私は本日この講演会を九州国立博物館と共催させていただいております英国ノーフォーク州にございますセインズベリー日本芸術研究所の所長をしております水鳥と申します。司会を務めさせていただきますのでどうぞよろしくお願いいたします。本日の講演会は2部構成になっております。一部の講演会の後に休憩がございまして、その後パネルディスカッションということになります。本日の講演会、先ほど申し上げましたように九州国立博物館との共催でさせていただいておりますところ、まずはじめに島谷九州国立博物館館長様から開会のご挨拶を一言いただきたいと思います。よろしくお願いいたします。
皆様こんにちは。九州国立博物館の島谷でございます。本日は第4回石橋財団レクチャーシリーズ茶文化としての茶の湯産品としての茶にお越しいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。とてもいい天気になりましたので、九州過ごしやすい気候でありますが、今日はお茶のお話でお楽しみいただければと思っております。石橋財団レクチャーシリーズはイギリスにございますセインズベリー日本芸術研究所の主催により、日本文化がどのようにして欧米で重要解釈され、翻って日本にどのような形で影響を与えてきたかという日欧米文化交流の変遷を日本の聴衆に伝えることを目的に2013年より実施されており、今回で4回目となります。これまでは東京と京都で開催されましたが、今回はここ九州国立博物館で開催していただくことになりまして、日本文化を代表するものの中でも特に外国人にとって難解であると思われがちな茶をめぐる文化について講演とパネルディスカッションを実施いたします。海外から見た茶の文化、緑茶の交易、消費の歴史に注目をいたしまして、茶を通じた国際交流の歴史を探ることにしております。ところで九州国立博物館は先月の28日から毎週金曜日と土曜日は午後8時まで夜間開館を延長することにいたしました。この夜間開館の実施につきましては、太宰府市、太宰府天満宮、太宰府観光協会などとともに古都太宰府ナイトエリア創出委員会を設置いたしまして、地域と連携しながら取り組んできたところでございます。太宰府市におかれましては、付近の市道のライトアップ、お隣の太宰府天満宮様におかれましては、本殿の参拝時間の延長で、そして境内のライトアップ、それで参道の商店街では営業時間の延長など、地域と一体となった魅力あるナイトエリアを創出しております。九州国立博物館におきましても、夜のバックヤードツアー、さらにはコンサート、地域と連携したイベントなど、たくさんの企画を用意しておりますが、今後も皆様に楽しんでいただける企画を考えてまいります。お車じゃなくて、天満宮から虹のエスカレーターで上がってきた方は、上がってきてすぐ左手にビオトープという調整池があるんですが、その周りに今年はしだれ桜を100本植えました。ちょっと調整をして桜の時期をずらしましたので、夜間開館の時に咲くようにいたしましたが、まだまだこれからですので、これから4、5年後には桜の名所として九州国立博物館が注目されるようになるのではないかと思います。天満宮の梅、九博の桜という形で展示物だけではなくて環境も楽しんでいただけるようにしたいと思っております。引き続きフィールドだけではなくて内容も含めて魅力ある博物館になるよう精一杯取り組んでまいりますので、これからも九州国立博物館をよろしくお願いしたいと思っております。 最後に本日お集まりの皆様のますますのご多幸を記念しまして、私の挨拶に変えさせていただきます。どうぞ今日は楽しんでください。よろしくお願いいたします。
島谷館長様、誠にありがとうございました。続きまして、私どもセインズベリー日本芸術研究所の理事長をしておりますデイビッド・リチャードソンから一言ご挨拶をさせていただきます。私どもの研究所はイギリスのイーストアングリア大学という大学の一部でございます。リチャードソンはそのイーストアングリア大学の学長としてセインズベリー日本芸術研究所の理事長を兼ねております。リチャードソン先生、よろしくお願いいたします。
Ladies and gentlemen, konnichiwa. I'm delighted to be given this opportunity to say a few words to open this event as President of the University of East Anglia and as the Chair of the Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Culture. The Sainsbury Institute inaugurated this lecture series 4 years ago. The concept of these lectures is to present to a Japanese audience an alternative and sometimes even provocative set of views on traditional and popular aspects of Japanese art and culture. In past years, we've selected themes such as international expositions, Japanese archaeology, and Japanese gardens for these wonderful talks. And these presentations have been hosted at some very prestigious venues, including Tokyo University and the Tokyo National Museum. Now this year, we took the ever more ambitious decision of focusing our sights on Japanese tea culture, which in the minds of many Japanese is a quintessentially Japanese topic. And I'm thinking that some of you in the audience are perhaps still dubious about the idea of learning something new about Japanese tea culture today. However, I'm confident that our two excellent speakers, Professor Morgan Pitelka and Dr. Robert Hellier, will provide you with some very intriguing insights and new research. We're delighted that our co-organiser this year is the Kyushu National Museum, a wonderful place. I've been here for an hour or so now and had a chance to have a look around. It's the newest of all the national museums in Japan, and was established with the concept of promoting the understanding of the formation of Japanese culture from an Asian historical perspective. And so I think the mission of this museum resonates strongly with the concept of our lecture series. I'd therefore also like to take this opportunity to thank the director, Mr. Shimatani Hiroyuki, who took a personal interest in organising this event with the Sainsbury Institute. Thank you. And also the Deputy Director, Mr. Ito Yoshikawa, one of the most prominent researchers in Japan on tea culture, and he's kindly going to moderate the second part of today's event. Now, as a British organisation researching and offering education on Japanese culture from the dawn of its existence, the Sainsbury Institute has decided its core mission is to serve as a bridge between the peoples and cultures of the two countries, the UK and Japan. In other words, we are committed to connecting these two countries together, but not just these two countries and countries beyond. Since the UK opted to leave the European Union last year, we're constantly reminded how the so-called post-truth political discourse works in practice. And this deeply concerning situation has demonstrated to me just how much we, as leaders of eminent universities, really do have to connect with the wider communities that we serve. Academic institutions such as the Sainsbury Institute and the University of East Anglia, to which the Sainsbury Institute belongs, have always been places of learning, places to raise aspirations, and places to make discoveries. And our mission is to make a positive difference on the world in which we live. And so I sincerely hope that today's event will be another occasion to fulfill our mission. And last, but not least, I would like to express my profound gratitude to the Ishibashi Foundation for making all of this possible. Thank you. Arigato.
ありがとうございました。それでは早速本日の講演会に入りたいと思います。お一人目の講演者をご紹介させていただきます。モーガン・ピテルカ、ノースカロライナ大学チャペルヒル校教授兼カロライナアジアセンター所長でいらっしゃいます。ピテルカ教授のご専門は近代以降の日本の歴史でございます。同氏は2001年プリンストン大学より博士号を取得され、2001年に私どもの研究所のフェローとして1年間イギリスで過ごされました。楽焼の歴史および戦国時代以降の武人がどのような形で茶文化の発展に貢献してきたかを論じた書籍を含め多数のご本を出版されています。主な書籍に Spectacular Accumulation, Material Culture, 徳川家康 and Samurai Sociability 2016年間他がございます。それではピトリカ教授どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
皆様、今日は英語で発表させていただきますので、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。I am suffering from a terrible cold, and I sound bad, and I apologize. Please bear with me. Writings on tea culture in Japanese tend to emphasize a few individuals, objects, and networks as the keys to understanding the larger progress of the practice. A few famous men, notably Sen no Rikyu, help us to understand the vision and politics of tea culture. A handful of famous objects, or meibutsu, also are used to illustrate the aesthetics of tea, and certain networks, particularly the connections between Zen Buddhist temples, are used to explain the growth and spread of tea practice in its formative period. I will argue today that the attention of tea historians on these examples has obscured or hidden the diversity and complexity of tea culture's growth into one of the most influential forms of tradition in Japan. In particular, I will propose that Chinese ceramics, elite social rituals, and the culture of war played a larger role in the development and expansion of tea practice than is usually acknowledged. The history of tea culture in Japan is often narrated as a history of brilliant individuals, men who possessed a rare and unusual genius that allowed them to transform tea drinking into the powerful tradition that it is today. I will use today just two examples of these geniuses who are emphasized in the history of tea. First is Ikkyu Soljun. Ikkyu is famous as the leader of the Zen temple Daitokuji towards the end of his life. He developed a considerable following among merchants and other wealthy residents of Sakai. He was also an influential figure in Kyoto's somewhat scattered elite cultural landscape before, during, and after the destructive Onin War of 1467 to 1477. Ikkyu is associated with a wide range of urban cultural figures in the 15th century, including the Renga poet Sayokoen Socho, who sponsored the construction of the lower level of the Sanmon Gate at Daitokuji in the 1520s. It is perhaps natural that Ikkyu is believed to have been influential on some of the early leaders of the tea world as well. However, concrete, reliable evidence for Ikkyu's involvement in tea culture is very thin. A later observer of tea culture, the influential tea practitioner and diarist Yamanoue Soji, recorded that Ikkyu was the Zen teacher of Murata Shuko, sometimes also referred to as Juko, but I'll refer to him as Shuko as is practiced among scholars today. Shuko is widely seen as the father of rustic tea, wabicha. And this link between Ikkyu and Shuko is repeated again and again in the histories of tea that are written in Japan. But there is very little documentary evidence to connect these two men. Shuko is famous for moving tea practice away from a focus on the collection and display of Chinese things, or karamono, toward a more creative and synthetic process of selecting and arranging utensils for tea. Later historical sources claim that Shuko was from the city of Nara and entered Shomyoji, a Pure Land school Buddhist temple, as a youth before becoming a student of Zen. For example, the text Talks on the Origins of Tea, Genyu Chawa, which was published in 1745, so much later, claims that Shuko left Shomyoji and began studying at a temple called Shuonan, which is sometimes also called Ikkyuji. Shuonan was a small temple in southern Kyoto in which Ikkyu apparently resided for long periods of time when the capital was in disarray. And it was here that many poets and other cultural figures sought out Ikkyu for training in Zen. This is the only evidence we have linking Ikkyu and Shuko, and it was published in 1745. But this relationship between these two men is repeated in many histories of tea. What then was Shuko's role in tea culture? Here too, we suffer from a lack of good evidence from the period. Most accounts of Shuko's activities are much later. The sole remaining primary source attributed to him is the text Letter on the Heart, Kokoro no Fumi. Likewise, tea utensils with a clear connection to Shuko are very rare. One meibutsu that is attributed to Shuko as both owner and creator is a tea scoop, currently in the collection of the Kosetsu Art Museum, widely believed to be the first bamboo tea scoop created in the history of Chanoyu in Japan. As you can see, the piece has a wide, almost bulbous shape above the joint and a plump, tapered handle. Also, the wood is darker than most carved bamboo tea scoops. Cumulatively, these material characteristics do lend the piece an older, almost embryonic quality that makes it appear to come from a later age. The 17th century tea master Sen Sultan attributed this piece, named Chahyo, or tea gourd, to Shuko in a box inscription. But we have no other evidence that links this to Shuko, who of course died long before the time of Sultan. Another piece associated with Shuko is a Chinese-made ceramic tea caddy called Shuko Bundin. This meibutsu was apparently owned by Shuko, who gifted it to a tea master named Tsuda Sogyu. Sometimes this piece is called Tennojiya Bundin because of its association with Tsuda Sogyu. This small ceramic container, just this large, is typical of a class of imported Chinese ceramics that 15th and 16th century tea practitioners valued for their iron brown glaze and modest beauty. These pieces were mostly produced, it seems, in the Fujian region of China, and may have been used in China as medicine containers before being exported to Japan, along with tenmoku tea bowls, both of which were extremely popular among the warrior class and among the growing population of commoner tea practitioners. According to documentation that accompanies the piece, Sogyu gave it to the warlord Oda Nobunaga, who eventually gifted it back to Sogyu, who then gifted it to another contemporary. Eventually, this piece ended up in the collection of the shogunate, and from there it was given to a warlord during the Tokugawa period. So it may be that its connection to Shuko was part of what made it valuable. But it also seems possible that the connection to Shuko was invented by later owners of the piece. This is always a problem in the history of tea utensils. Another interesting form of tea utensils connected to Shuko is a number of tea bowls known as Shuko Celadon tea bowls, Shuko Seiji Chawan, that can be found in various museum collections in Japan. These bowls are usually conical, similar in shape to some tenmoku bowls, but are covered with a translucent greenish glaze. A comb-like pattern is incised into the outside wall of the bowl, leading down to an unglazed foot. We see references to bowls called Shuko Seiji Chawan in the documentary record from the middle of the 16th century. There are 23 references in tea diaries between 1542 and 1575. However, we cannot firmly link these references to any single bowl because there are many examples of bowls called Shuko Seiji Chawan. On the screen you see a bowl in the collection of Honganji. Here is a piece from the collection of the Nezu Museum. The Nezu Museum actually has 3 tea bowls of this kind, one of which has documentation claiming that it was once owned by Sen no Rikyu. The Idemitsu Museum likewise has a fine example that is well published, as does the Mitsui Bunko Museum. So perhaps the proliferation of references to a Shuko Celadon tea bowl in the mid-16th century indicates a surge of interest in both Shuko and in this particular style of Chinese-made celadon tea bowls. This may have led, in turn, to more and more bowls with this shape and this design being labeled Shuko Seiji Chawan. It may be a name for their style and not an indication of ownership. Unfortunately, this means these bowls do not help us to understand Shuko's role in tea culture. In sum, there's very little evidence linking Ikkyu and Shuko, and it is hard for us to understand their roles within the history of tea. I argue that this is not an isolated case, but a pattern. The huge emphasis that tea histories have placed on a few individuals, on a few objects, and on the network of Zen temples that supposedly links them is based mostly on later writings and is thus historically inaccurate. I would like to propose a different interpretation that highlights the role of warriors in the origins of the tradition and the role of Chinese ceramics in shaping tea practice and tea aesthetics. Of course, the history of karamono, or Chinese things, is always included when we think about the development of tea culture. Yesterday, I attended an exhibition at the Tokyo National Museum and saw many beautiful karamono. But the influence of Chinese ceramics is often understood to end with the rise of wabi-cha. I would like to challenge that interpretation. The Ashikaga shoguns and other powerful warrior leaders of the 15th century, as you see on the screen, began to devote increasing resources to the creation of secular spaces for social gatherings. Their activities were modeled on those of the imperial court. The Ashikaga shoguns, particularly the third shogun, Yoshimitsu, the sixth shogun, Yoshinori, and the eighth shogun, Yoshimasa, hired cultural advisors, the famous dooboshu, to acquire and arrange Chinese things along with other forms of curatorial and programming work. Among the Chinese works valued by the Ashikaga shoguns and their advisors were calligraphy, paintings by Chinese Zen monks, Chinese tea bowls, Chinese lacquer vessels, and other imported objects. These shoguns also invested in the construction of new palaces with rooms that were deliberately designed to allow sociability, ritual and social interactions between warriors. These palatial structures thus put the display of Chinese ceramics at the very center of the social and political world of elite warriors. The primary record of this Ashikaga culture of sociability is known as the Manual of the Attendant of the Shogunal Collection, the Kundaikan Sochoki. We know that this text is one of the foundational works in tea history, as well as a landmark in the history of Japanese painting. But it should also be understood as a major record of warrior, social, and ritual culture. Attributed to one of the Ashikaga cultural advisors, Soami, this manual presents detailed information on the proper display of Chinese art, with great attention paid to protocols for the arrangement and display of hanging scrolls and ceramics in particular. The manual and other display records from the period make it clear that the Ashikaga shoguns routinely displayed Chinese ceramics and other artworks in the course of their social gatherings, particularly in the reception rooms in which the shogun and his peers ritually greeted and entertained visitors. Why then have histories of tea culture tended to de-emphasize the warrior origins of this practice? It may be that the dominance of commoner schools of tea in the Tokugawa period and the continuing influence of their descendants in modern Japan has biased historians to emphasize non-samurai participants. I often read that commoner tea masters were innovators who worked against the powerful warrior patrons who sustained them. But I argue that it was warrior patrons who were the engine for driving changes in the world of tea culture in the 16th and 17th centuries. Many warlords in the Sengoku period sought to appropriate the social and cultural practices of the Ashikaga, even as the structures of Ashikaga rule were being weakened by civil war after the Onin War. One notable example is the Asakura House of Sengoku Daimyo in what is now Fukui, but was then Echizen province. The Asakura transformed their castle town of Ichijo-dani into a little Kyoto, a provincial center that reproduced the social and cultural activities that had previously marked Ashikaga rule in the capital. They acquired a large collection of Chinese art, as noted in records from the 16th century, such as the Yamashina family diaries and the Chinese poetry anthology, Collection of Literature of the Five Phoenixes. The Asakura recruited vassals, expanded their territory, and became influential patrons of the arts in an age of widespread civil war. In addition, the Asakura are explicitly mentioned in the prologue of one extant version of the Manual of the Attendant of the Shogunal Collection, Kundaikan Sochoki, as having sponsored the writing of that copy. For provincial warlords like the Asakura, Chinese ceramics and the tea ceremony represented a form of cultural capital, as well as an opportunity to perform the civilized graces of the capital. The Asakura used their collection in social gatherings in their palatial residence in the heart of the city, both to show off their wealth and status to warriors from their own region and to entertain visiting warlords and notables from the capital city who were passing through Echizen. At the end of the 15th century, for example, Shirakawa Masaasa, a warlord from northern Japan, stayed in Ichijo-dani with his army of nearly 700 men. Surely they enjoyed a tea gathering together. A later and more famous example occurred when the Asakura hosted and entertained Ashikaga Yoshiaki on at least two occasions. These were ritual events with banquets, tea gatherings, and poetry exchanges, at which the Asakura family's collection of Chinese art and ceramics was displayed. The documentary evidence regarding the Asakura is supported by material from the extensive excavations of Ichijodani. The Asakura residence itself has been excavated, and it included a tea house with decorative features in the Shoin-zukuri style. The tea house faced a strolling garden with a pond. Excavations yielded lots of high-quality tea utensils, particularly ceramics, which match and in many cases exceed those noted in the documentary record. The range and the depth of the collection is notable. Excavated wares include Chinese porcelains, Longquan celadons, Jingdezhen shadow green porcelains, Jianware tea bowls, and many other varieties of luxury ceramics from China. Additionally, archaeologists found inlaid koryo celadons from Korea. One particularly abundant site in Ichijodani is a former elite warrior residence not far from the Asakura Palace, probably the home of a retainer of the warlord, a vassal. Archaeologists unearthed a range of Chinese ceramics from this site, including porcelain and celadon dishes, tenmoku tea bowls, and 2 large and 1 medium chatsubo. These materials show us that not only the Asakura themselves, but also their elite retainers collected high-quality Chinese ceramics and used them for tea. This implies that these ceramics were spread even among samurai who wanted to be at the elite level. Another site from Ichijodani, the location of a temple called Saigoji, included many Chinese ceramics, including tea utensils. In Kyoto, warriors often organized tea gatherings, poetry gatherings, and other social rituals at Buddhist temples. And these temples often had tea rooms and tea gardens. The excavation of Saigoji in Ichijodani points to a similar use of temple space for tea gatherings and the display of Chinese ceramics in the provinces as well. Although the combined forces of Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu ultimately destroyed the Asakura in 1573, it seems that their cultivated independence and their successful rule until that point in Echizen were both demonstrated in part through the acquisition and display of Chinese ceramics. The Asakura were not an isolated case. Such practices were widespread among provincial warlords at the time. This is illustrated by 2 genres of collecting records that appeared in the 16th century. First, memoranda of famous objects, meibutsuki, became popular among both commoner and warrior tea practitioners in this period. One of the earliest examples is called Record of Praiseworthy Famous Objects, or Seigan Meibutsuki. This text lists 414 objects divided into separate categories, providing details such as the location of previous and current owners. Many of the meibutsu in this text were in the collections of provincial warriors, including the Hosokawa, Asakura, Takeda, Miyoshi, and other warrior families. Second, tea diaries, or chakaiki, also clearly show that provincial warlords were extremely active in the field of tea. The gathering records of Tennojiya, or Tennojiya Kaiki, and the gathering records of Matsuya, or Matsuya Kaiki, both note many warlord participants in early tea gatherings, as well as many famous objects, or meibutsu, that these warlords acquired, owned, and used. The warlord Matsunaga Hisahide, for example, reportedly owned at least 59 meibutsu, 8 of which had previously been part of the Ashikaga collection. In short, 16th century warlords appear, based on these two genres of collecting records, to have been major patrons and participants in the growing world of elite tea culture. In part because of their access to significant financial resources, they were rich. In part because of their aspiration to reproduce the social rankings and aristocratic trappings of Kyoto, provincial warlords took part in an effort to construct a culture of meibutsu acquisition and display that was part of the foundation of tea culture and tea practice. Next, I would like to discuss the 3 unifiers, Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu, who are often dismissed as illegitimate tea innovators because their interest in tea practice was obviously connected to their political and military activities. In the case of Nobunaga, for example, his hunt for famous objects, or meibutsugari, in which his vassals went and seized meibutsu from tea men in Kyoto and Sakai, helped him to form the first great warrior collection of Chinese art since the dissolution of the Ashikaga collection. Nobunaga also sponsored some significant tea events, such as a large tea gathering at Shokokuji in Kyoto in 1574. This event included the famed Chinese tea caddy named Hatsuhana that would later be owned by Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu. It was also a rare occasion on which Nobunaga gave fragments of the prized piece of imported fragrant wood known as ranjatai, a true meibutsu, to several participants, including Sennorikyu, a privilege that in the past had been reserved for emperors and shoguns. The acquisition of tea utensils and the strategic use of these works in tea gatherings became a core component of Nobunaga's strategies for unification. He did acquire a large collection of tea utensils. It seems that more than 250 meibutsu came into his possession before his death in 1582. I believe we must acknowledge that the unifiers were uniquely innovative in their engagement with tea culture. Nobunaga was particularly fond, for example, of chatsubo, the large ceramic storage jars, and he used them in new, innovative ways. The first tea jar that he acquired was the meibutsu known as Matsushima, a Chinese-produced jar that had once been in the collection of the Ashikaga shoguns. The tea master Imai Sokyu gifted this piece to Nobunaga in 1570. Nobunaga frequently used the jar in tea gatherings that he hosted or attended, and as a result, it appears dozens of times in the chakaiki from the period. Similarly, Nobunaga acquired a tea jar named Mikazuki, and at a large tea gathering held at Myokakuji in 1575, he used it in a very unusual way. This gathering was intended to mark Nobunaga's victory over the Nagashima Federation of religious uprisings that had challenged him since 1570. The guests included a group of 17 famous tea men from the city of Sakai. Nobunaga instructed Sen-no-rikyu, who was preparing tea that day, to arrange a Chinese hanging scroll in the alcove. This was a popular choice among elite tea practitioners who were lucky enough to own fine Chinese paintings or calligraphy. He also, however, placed the chatsubo Mikazuki in the alcove alongside the hanging scroll, which, as far as we know, had never been done before. This had a profound effect on warrior interest in chatsubo, or tea jars. Previously, warriors collected tea jars primarily for the purpose of shipping and storing tea leaves. But now, warriors with the means, with the money, could imagine acquiring chatsubo for the purpose of displaying them in the tea room. In other words, Nobunaga shifted the practice of tea. Hideyoshi made the acquisition, display, and exchange of tea utensils an even more central platform of his political and military career. The Cattano Grand Tea Gathering of 1587 is perhaps the most famous tea spectacle with which he is associated, and at which his impressive collection of ceramics was displayed. Less well known, but just as significant, was the prior massive tea gathering that Hideyoshi organized and that Rikyu managed at Daitokuji in 1585. Attendees included Hideyoshi's personal guard, various warlords, 50 residents of Kyoto, 24 residents of Sakai, invited by Rikyu and Tsuda Sogyu, and at least 150 tea practitioners. This was an unprecedented tea event, a statement by Hideyoshi that he intended to increase his activities as both a warlord and as a patron of the arts. This was a semi-public statement about his own authority and cultural legitimacy played out in the heart of Kyoto. The invited guests brought their prized tea utensils and set up small enclosed spaces using folding screens to practice tea. Hideyoshi displayed many of his own utensils for guests, while Rikyu and Tsuda Sogyu used objects from Hideyoshi's collection to serve tea throughout the day. This event and the other large tea-related spectacles that Hideyoshi organized played a major role in putting tea culture at the heart of elite Japanese politics. Another significant example of Hideyoshi's pageantry was a tea gathering and exhibition at the imperial court later in 1585. an event that shows Hideyoshi's interest in ritually affirming his own political dominance. This event may have been a response to Hideyoshi's recent advancements in court rank, an achievement that he had chased by financially patronizing the cash-strapped court and also engaging in regular gift exchange with its aristocratic members. Hideyoshi's appointment to the rank of Imperial Chancellor, or Kampaku, was a particular note of pride at this time. The preparation for the event took several days. When Hideyoshi arrived and offered ritual greetings to Emperor Ogimachi on the morning of the 7th day of the 10th month, he was well prepared to put on his best performance. Following this official reception, Hideyoshi, his family and retainers, and a small group of courtiers in attendance shifted into a formal banqueting room, where Hideyoshi, guided by Rikyu, carefully prepared tea and served it directly to the emperor and 5 nobles. Rikyu then moved to a nearby hall to prepare tea for a much larger group of courtiers, divided into groups of 7. Meanwhile, Hideyoshi had appropriated 2 halls in the palace where he was exhibiting his own collection of tea utensils to the emperor. This event perhaps represents the apogee of Hideyoshi's cultural power, the most successful attempt to inscribe his own name and accomplishments on the history of the culture of the imperial capital. He, of course, went on to host many more impressive tea gatherings. He staged many no-theatrical productions. He sponsored the construction of many monuments and buildings. But for me, the image of Hideyoshi determinedly whisking powdered green tea in one of his own prized tea bowls and placing it on the tatami mat before the emperor himself stands out as a powerful image of the almost desperate ambition of the Toyotomi lord. But it would be a mistake, I think, to see Hideyoshi as an illegitimate tea innovator, or as less important than his employee, Senno Rikyu. It was only through the interaction between these 2 men, and indeed through the effect they had on tea society, that tea culture progressed and transformed into its early modern form. I will briefly mention Tokugawa Ieyasu, who clearly was the least interested in tea culture of the 3 unifiers. Yet, Ieyasu amassed one of the most impressive collections of meibutsu since the Ashikaga shoguns. And when he died, he divided this collection up among the 3 Tokugawa branch families, which in turn allowed them to continue to be active as tea patrons. I would go so far as to suggest that Omote Senkei would not exist without Tokugawa Ieyasu. Why? Because he gave part of his huge collection of art to the Kii Tokugawa, and they in turn hired Sensotan's son Koshin Sosa to be their official tea master. This association with the Tokugawa branch family gave Koshin and the leaders of the Iemoto who followed him the legitimacy and authority to attract disciples and students from both the warrior class and the urban commoner elite, which in turn allowed Omote Senkei to grow over the centuries. Warrior patronage was at the heart of the success of the Senkei tea schools. Next, I'd like to turn very briefly to Sen no Rikyu, perhaps the most important innovator in the history of tea culture. As the perfecter of wabi tea, he is often associated with a complete embrace of unique Japanese objects. But Chinese manufactured jianware or tenmoku tea bowls and Chinese celadon tea bowls dominate his early recorded tea gatherings. In fact, in many of the earliest gatherings, the recorded tea bowl is listed as shuko tea bowl, the style of celadon bowl from China that I mentioned earlier. In addition, Rikyu began to use imported Korean tea bowls regularly, demonstrating an overall preference for imported Asian tea bowls rather than domestically produced wares. Toward the end of his career, however, a few new types of tea bowls began to appear in tea diaries that record his gatherings. We see black tea bowls, kurochaman, new ware tea bowls, imayaki chaman, and in one instance, a Rikyu-shaped tea bowl, Rikyu gata chaman. These names indicate a shift in Sen no Rikyu's preferences as a tea participant. These terms appear to have referred to a range of new domestically produced ceramics that provided tea practitioners with additional options in the selection and arrangement of utensils for a gathering. These options included experimental low-temperature ceramics made by potters living and working in Kyoto, like the one that you see on the screen. They also include raku ceramics, as well as stoneware such as kiseto and setoguro, produced in the large kilns located to the east in Seto and Mino provinces. What is distinctive about these wares is that they all attempted to appropriate certain stylistic and aesthetic characteristics from imported Chinese wares, particularly the yellow, brown, and red colors of Chinese sansai, or three-color ceramics, and the dark brown and black colors of tenmoku wares. This shift represents the larger turn in the world of tea practitioners from a focus on Chinese and Korean ceramics to domestically produced ceramics that borrowed the style of imported wares, but that radically experimented with their shapes. Oh, sorry. I lost my place. Okay. So, for example, if we compare a black raku tea bowl attributed to the founder of the raku tradition, Chojiro, to a black seto bowl made by a potter at the Mino Seto kilns, if we compare these two bowls with a black glazed tenmoku tea bowl made in China, we see that all three have similar colors. They're all black. But the forms, the shapes, are remarkably different. All three objects have deep black glaze. The Chinese bowl, of course, has a special iridescence. The raku bowl is matte black and pockmarked. The black seto bowl has a rough, uneven surface. And when we see the bowls on the screen under the bright lights of this lecture hall, the glazes look completely different. But in the dimly lit space of the tea room, the darkness of each of these glazes allowed the color of the matcha to shine. So it was the shapes of the pieces that were new, but the coloration was borrowed. Chinese ceramics influenced the development of these wares, is my point. The raku bowl is in the shape of a half cylinder with a rounded, undulating lip at the top of the bowl, a soft hip, and a foot marking the bottom. The black seto bowl, by contrast, has a rough, flaring mouth at the top and a wide, angular hip at the base. Both of these bowls represent new shapes in the lexicon of East Asian ceramics. Probably, indeed, responses to the innovative requests of tea masters like Rikyu, who were growing in confidence and becoming increasingly playful in their planning for tea gatherings. The innovations of this age, the almost mythical moment of Momoyama culture, were, I hope I have demonstrated, shaped by warrior rituals of sociability and by the standards set by Chinese ceramics that warriors cherished. Conclusion. Conventional histories of tea culture in Japan have tended to either ignore warrior involvement in the formation of tea culture, or at the very least, they have minimized the central role of warlords in the emergence of the tradition. So, what is missing from our understanding of warrior involvement in the history of tea culture? First, I think we have not paid enough attention to the role of warrior rituals of sociability in the formation of large collections, like the Ashikaga collection, or like Ieyasu's collection, and the influence of this sociability on the history and culture of tea itself. Medieval calendrical anniversaries and other rituals provided opportunities for gift giving that supplied the Ashikaga shoguns with many meibutsu for their collection. For example, in the 15th century, a Kyoto temple abbot who kept a diary noted that some of the presents, some of the gifts that Ashikaga Yoshimochi and Ashikaga Yoshinori received were part of a calendrical gift exchange known as Hassaku. Elite warriors gave the Ashikaga shoguns various objects to mark their relationship with the shogunate. These included screens, fans, tea bowls, water jars, incense containers, and gold and silver vessels. The shogun then reciprocated, giving swords, ceramics, or other precious objects back to their vassals in an exchange of loyalty, fealty. This record is a reminder that the Ashikaga collection was not amassed for tea culture or for the purposes that later tea practitioners prioritized. Rather, the Ashikaga collection shows us the network of vassals, allies, and relationships that made the Ashikaga shoguns powerful. Some Ashikaga treasures entered the collection from other routes. The curators, the doboshu, bought paintings and ceramics from merchants, or acquired them through Zen Buddhist temples. The sociability of warriors played out in the rituals and practices of the banquet halls, the visitation rooms that the Ashikaga built, helped create the Ashikaga collection, and contributed to its spread throughout the provinces of Japan after the Onin War. This, in turn, is one of the founding structures for the later development of tea culture. Second, I think we have not been attentive enough to the influence of warrior use of meibutsu for political reasons in a time of war. We have to remember that warlords like Nobunaga exchanged meibutsu, but they also exchanged hitojichi, hostages. They confiscated swords and tea bowls. They also took heads from their enemies. Okay, sorry. Okay. Maybe the pointer. Okay. And we must also remember that the meibutsu of this period moved through a society at war. When Hideyoshi destroyed the Hojo at Odawara in 1590, he and his generals relaxed inside of tea houses and a banqueting pavilion that Ieyasu had constructed near Odawara. This is a part of tea culture too. Another example comes from the career of Tokugawa Ieyasu. After he destroyed Osaka Castle in 1615, he sent his vassals into the rubble of the castle to retrieve the fragments of broken meibutsu and damaged swords. Rescuing these objects from the destruction was a way of remaking warrior society and creating a new form of stability in the political order through the use of material culture. In conclusion, traditions survive because of a balance between structures that are strong and continuous, thank you, and spaces that allow innovation. For example, the Iemoto system has successfully supported tea practice in Japan for hundreds of years because it maintains this balance between structures, such as the system of licenses, the curriculum of tea practice, the hierarchy of the tea school itself, and spaces in which people can be creative, such as toriawase, such as the decision to buy this tea bowl or that tea bowl, and in the unique social interactions between host and guest in every tea gathering. I've tried to argue today that in the period of its formation, tea culture was influenced by a different set of rules and structures that provided balance for tea culture. These rules and structures came from the social rituals of the warrior class and from the broad aesthetic and stylistic patterns of Chinese ceramics. We thus need to rewrite tea history and understand that Sengoku daimyo, provincial warlords, were also influential tea practitioners who played a major role in the history of tea, and that Chanoyu owes a huge debt to Chinese ceramics, Perhaps acknowledging this debt could help to form a bridge between Japan and China today. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. 以上です。
ピテルカ教授ありがとうございました。